Well, hey there, everybody. It's your boy, Mr. Perry. And here we are, finally into Unit 8, and we're going to start learning about two-dimensional arrays. So let's get into it. So before we start getting into two-dimensional arrays, let's just do a quick review of arrays. We learned about arrays in Unit 6, so it's been a while since we've gotten into all of the syntax and everything with that, and it's useful to just kind of review all of this before we move into 2D arrays. So arrays are a data structure used to store multiple values of the same data type, and they basically provide a block of memory to store a collection of those items as long as they are of the same data type. So we've got our one-dimensional array of integers called scores, and it's got available for 5 spaces, and then we've got an array of strings called the Avengers, storing everybody here. Arrays contain elements that are located at various index values. So again, index starts at 0, goes up until the length -1. Of course, we can have arrays for all different types of data. We can do primitive data types as well as reference data types like strings and even objects of different classes. We can store doubles, we can store booleans, whatever. And then, of course, if you want to access individual elements of an array, you reference them by the name of the array, and then in square brackets, we put the index value. And so, you can access elements of the array and you can store them in variables, or you can use them in print statements or whatever you need to do there. And then let's see, just again, quick reviewing of our syntax here. This line right here is going to create an array of integers called scores, sets the length to be 5. And again, you can put any number you want to in this square bracket. And then Java automatically fills them with the default data type, or the default value for that data type. But then each one of these lines of code would go through and would assign scores at all of the different index values to be these particular values. So each line of code would replace those zeros with whatever value we're sending in. And then there's also another way to create an array called an initializer list. This is kind of the easier, sort of quickest way of doing it, where you just have the data type, your square brackets, the name of your array, and then you set it equal to, and then inside these curly braces, you put all of your elements that you want to be in that array. So this just kind of bypasses all of the extra lines of code that you would need to do it this way. You can just do it quickly and easily in a single line of code using what's called an initializer list. And then, of course, the length is an instance variable, a public instance variable that you can access for arrays. So, and again, you just do the name of the array, the dot operator, and then the word length. No need for parentheses on this. This would return however many, it looks like it's 5. This would return the number 5 because there are 5 elements in our array called scores. So now that we've gone through all of that, let's now bump up to a two-dimensional array. And so a two-dimensional array is an array of one-dimensional arrays that can be represented by a grid. So you can think of this as the first row of this two-dimensional array, and it contains 1, 3, and 6. So it contains an array, of its own, and then this would be the second row of the array, and again, it's got these 3 values. This would be the third row of the array. It's got these 3 values, and then finally the fourth row of the array has these 3 values. But we can think of this as an array of individual arrays, and that's, again, how Java tends to see it. The rows, all of those all get indexed starting at 0, so this is row 0, row 1, row 2, row 3. And then the columns also are indexed the same way, so this is column 0, column 1, column 2. There you go. And again, a two-dimensional array. This is the syntax for how you initialize it and how you set some of the values. And again, it's an array of one-dimensional arrays that can be represented as a grid. So we're going to look at this in just a second. Now, just like one-dimensional arrays, there are 2 ways to declare and initialize a two-dimensional array. You can do what I call the standard 2D array syntax, which is the data type, 2 sets of square brackets, the array name, and then equals new, and then the data type again, and then this time inside your square brackets you need the number of rows and the number of columns. So this first line of code right here creates a two-dimensional array of integers called nums, because it says int and then both of those, and then it's called nums. And then it sets it equal to this 2 by 2 two-dimensional array. Now you can put any number you want to in these square brackets over here. So you can create a two-dimensional array of any with any amount of rows or any amount of columns that you want to. Now all of these lines of code that you see down here would actually go through and set the individual value of each element in nums to be various integers. So row 0, column 0 would be 2, and then row 0, column 1 would be 7, and then row 1, column 0 would be 4, and row 1, column 1 would be 9. And so we could then represent that in grid forms. So this would be nums at 0, or this would be row 0 of nums, and this would be row 1 of nums, and it would contain those values. Like one-dimensional arrays, you can also use what's called an initializer list to declare and initialize a two-dimensional array. So obviously this is a little quicker and easier, and this is again the way I tend to do it if I'm declaring a two-dimensional array. So down here we've got a two-dimensional array of integers called nums, and it's set to these values. And then down here we have a two-dimensional array of strings called names, and it is set to these values. So let's go ahead and break down how we do an initializer list. So the first thing you need is to identify the data type, and then include two sets of your square brackets, and then you need to give it a name, declare a name of the 2D array. The next thing that you would have would be the equal sign, and then you're going to follow that with an outer set of curly braces. And this basically identifies the beginning and the end of the 2D array. So you see the outer curly braces here and here, and then you see the outer curly braces here, and then finally over here at the end. But each individual row of your two-dimensional array also gets its own set of curly braces, and this identifies the beginning and the end of your columns. So inner sets of curly braces, we'll go through and say, all right, well, this is the beginning and the end of each row. So this is column 0 and column 1. And then this again would be column 0 and column 1. So those inner curly braces show you where your individual rows begin and end. And so once created, you can assign values to the two-dimensional array. You can store the elements in a variable if you want to, or you can use them in calculations. So we'll take our two-dimensional array of names and containing these elements, and then look at these two lines of code down here. Go ahead and pause the video. How do you think these two lines of code would impact the contents of our 2D array? Okay, I'm assuming you paused the video and you answered the question. It's fairly straightforward. Here we're looking at row 0, column 1. So this is row 0. This would be column 1. So Sam is going to be replaced with John, or at least that's what I'm expecting. Down here we've got row 1, column 2. So this is row 1, and then column 0, 1, 2. So I'm expecting Joe to be replaced by Ava. And sure enough, John went right here, and then Ava went right there. So again, this is how you can create an array using a 2D array using an initializer list, and then this gives you an idea of how you can maybe manipulate the values and access the values and all that kind of stuff. With that, you've had your general introduction to two-dimensional arrays, so you should be ready to hop back into CSAwesome and continue your work, or you can check the 2D array activities document for alternate practice there.